Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Racing House. My name is Sakki, and today we're joined by Adam. How are you, Adam? Can you hear me a little bit?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you doing? How's things?
I'm good. I'm just getting back into the swing of doing this YouTube stuff, making content. I've got a few videos coming up, so happy to be back. I don't know if anyone's watching, but if you can't hear either of us, let us know in the comment section. If you've got any questions, we've already had a few come in. Let us know. Give us an update. Give us a thumbs up to let us know that you can actually hear what we're saying, because we've had a few technical difficulties, hence why we're delayed. So sorry for that. But we're here today to talk about Valtteri Bottas, Kimi Raikkonen, all the other drivers that have kind of been rumored to be leaving their teams, and all the drivers that have been rumored to come in. There's a lot of rumors floating about. Some very new drivers who have never been in F1 before. But we'll start with Kimi Raikkonen, and then we'll move on to Valtteri Bottas. So if you don't know already, Kimi Raikkonen is effectively going to be retiring from 2022. This is his last season. I know there's going to be a lot of tears out there. People are really upset when they heard this because he's a massive figure in the sport. But I think, to sum it up, Adam, you said the dominoes have started falling, which has triggered off a number of different things, including Valtteri Bottas signing today for Alfa Romeo to drive in 2022. So how do you feel about both these two things happening? Let us know in the comment section as well what you guys think as you're watching it.
Yeah, I think this is what we kind of half expected, wasn't it? I think there's been rumours floating around for a little while. The missing piece in the last year or so has always been, where would Valtteri go next? That was always the question. And now we know the answer. So I think as soon as Kimi announced the retirement, that this is it now. We know that the dominoes are starting to fall. Kimi's obviously an interesting first one. It's also interesting to see him actually speak about his experience and talk about things. Yeah, it's a shame, because I think Kimi's always been, or particularly lately, he's been more of a meme than people really realizing how good he was as a driver. Particularly earlier on in his career, he's been a very, very good driver for these 2 decades that he's been in the sport. And although it's fun that the way that he is to the media, and the way that he reacts to situations, and obviously the radio sound bites that we've heard already, he's been a very top tier driver for a very long time. But it's also interesting to see that Bottas has gone to a team that is actually quite a long way back from where he's used to be in for the past half a decade. So obviously he came from Williams, but at the time Williams were a bit fairly okay-ish team. But I think it's a good opportunity for Bottas. I think it really goes to show that he will be the number one driver there, and I would anticipate that there'll be a new driver there, so probably someone from the Ferrari academy. I know they've said that Alfa Romeo Sauber have said that they will have the say on drivers, but I think it makes sense. You look at the new talent coming through, and those FDA drivers are probably some of the best on the market at the moment. So I would imagine it's going to be Bottas, and then probably a young driver from that Ferrari academy, like a Schwartzman or an Eilert or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a massive thing for effectively a Mercedes driver, one of Toto's boys, to be taking that Ferrari seat. It really did catch me out by surprise, because there's a little sneak peek for you. I've made a video about the George Russell signing to Mercedes, so keep an eye out for that. It's going to drop as soon as it's announced. But I didn't anticipate Bottas going to Alfa Romeo. It just didn't even come into my thoughts process, because I know that they're a Ferrari team. They've got the Ferrari engine, and there's such a close link between them and Ferrari. So I feel like the whole kind of landscape in terms of the drivers and the powers between Mercedes and Ferrari engines, even Red Bull, has completely changed. I think that's completely out the window now, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some random drivers in completely random cars, and we don't know how that power struggle is going to play out and how it's completely switched. And it might have further implication in terms of which engine suppliers are supplying the teams. So traditionally, you think Ferrari, Alfa Romeo, Williams, Mercedes currently, that potentially may not be the case with completely different driver lineups. And I know it's a wild shot, but it could happen because
I think I've read that rumor as well, and I've seen a couple of people talk about the possibility of a Mercedes. I can't see it happening at all. I mean, if you look at just the history, and I know it's Sauber, and I know it's not Alfa Romeo, it is Sauber, but it wouldn't be a good look for that whole group when it comes to that, that Italian heritage and all that kind of thing. And they've got Stellantis, which are obviously very, very well in terms of owning Alfa Romeo, and they've got those links to Ferrari. I think that's one of those things where people are adding things up and maybe not realizing the relationships that go into the sport in terms of that kind of real strategic business level. The one that is interesting, though, that is in that similar kind of vein, is the Albon to Williams rumours, where there's been a little bit of tension there between Toto and Christian Horner, as you'd expect, just as it is on every day ending with a Y, really.
Every opportunity
about the possibility of having Alex Albon in that Williams next year. And Toto wants him to be released from the Red Bull driver program before it happens, which I think is a smart move, really, from Toto. I mean, there's Albon's on the market in terms of F1 drivers, but you wouldn't want to have that kind of intelligence gathering going from one side to the other if you were Toto. Not at all. And I think there's people saying, "Oh, well, it's petty." It's not petty. It's business. Right? If you're Alex Albon, you're thinking, "Well, if I'm a good spy at Williams for a couple of years, you never know what might happen. I might be able to go back." And there's people talking about the logistics of that engine deal for Williams. I mean, I think if you look at the way that obviously now George has come through that Mercedes driver program, and he's it's not confirmed yet, but he's going to Mercedes, isn't he? I think we can pretty much make that assumption. There isn't a Mercedes driver at that Williams team anymore, so maybe there is a door half open, but again, I can't see Williams making any major shake-ups now until 2025. I think this will be a period of consolidation, and unless Red Bull release Albon, I can see it being another driver pair in there. And I think we've spoken about, haven't we, about the potential driver pairings for Williams, not just privately between the pair of us.
Yeah, it's like, keep the questions coming in, guys. We'll get around to them eventually, but there is literally so much to talk about. We haven't even touched on the Bottas discussion. Just touching on Williams there quickly, I think I believe that we're going for a completely brand new driver lineup. I think the paid driver pool isn't as much, given the budget restrictions coming up, unless teams are literally ploughing loads of money into their investment and stacking it up for the future years like Red Bull. I don't think it will play as much of a role, given how much of an opportunity next year is. To answer your question, do you think Sergio Perez is really a paid driver at Red Bull? Me personally, 100% yes. I mean, if you look at he's just a very, very good paid driver. That's the matter of fact of it. He's backed by. Is he backed by the
yeah, see, I think it's slightly different. I don't think he's necessarily. The reality of it is, like a lot of the drivers on the F1 grid are what you could call, in theory, pay drivers.
Yeah, he brings sponsorship to the table,
because they all come. Exactly, they all come with their sponsorship, don't they? They all come with extensive backing, which is why they've got to a position to be in Formula One in the first place. That you've obviously looked at the numbers in previous video, where it's hundreds of thousands of pounds, or euros, or dollars, or whatever. You get to that level where you can actually be really noticed on an international stage. I mean, if you're not heavily backed by sponsorship, then you're in a driver academy. And if you're neither of those things, you're not getting anywhere near a Formula One seat, which is just a reality. But the difference is Sergio is taking those sponsors with him for the long haul. I don't think Red Bull are in a position where they need to hire a pay driver. I think they're in a position where they needed to hire the best driver that was potential in the market. At the time, Checo was that driver. But we've seen what Red Bull do in extreme sports and motorsports and things like that. They don't need a pay driver.
Yeah. They don't need a pay driver, but I think it also helps, with the amount that they're investing in the Honda engine this year, going forward, their own engine department. No one's going to turn down. I think it's around $8 to $10 million mark that Checo brings. No one's going to turn that down. And Checo is an amazing driver. Like we've all seen what he can do fighting through the pack. He's even had a race win this year and last year as well. Is that 2 race wins for Checo? Yeah. So yeah, and that's not many drivers can say that in this day and age. So Checo is an amazing driver first and foremost. So I think for Red Bull, it just made a lot of sense. A lot of sense.
Yeah, the only criticism with Checo really is I think when his back's against the wall, he's shown that he's really got that quality to come back through the field, hasn't he? We've seen that time and time again. But it's great coming from the pit lane to the position that he got to.
Yeah.
But let's see him come from 6th to 2nd or 7th to 1st. Like, it's great seeing him come from the back and score good points. That's brilliant. I think, but for him to really make that seat safe at Red Bull, we need to see him storm through the top of the pack as well as the middle and the back of the pack. Because he was known as the king of the midfield for a reason before that. But I think he's yet to prove that ultimate pace at the sharp end.
Yeah. With Checo, I think because he's at Red Bull, like I don't have that high expectation for him, despite being in the best car. I really do think that car is built for Max. Like it's undeniable. You can't have what is either fourth partner since Daniel. You can't have 4 to 5 drivers that do that badly versus Max. I know he's an amazing driver, but the gap shouldn't be that big. It just shouldn't be, especially given the car being the best car this year. I know we've seen Bottas struggle earlier on this year, but he's brought it back as he's learned about the car as they've developed it. And I don't think that's happening with Checo at the moment. So there's always question marks around that for me. But moving back to the case of Valtteri Bottas, do you think this is a good move for him? Do you think he had any other options really? Obviously, Sergio Perez was signed a few days ago for next year, and then Alonso signed again for next year. A lot of these deals have been sewn up, and do you think he had many other options around him? Was this the best that he could?
I don't think so. I don't think he had many other options in Formula One. I think Alpha is probably a good fit, and I think although it looks like a big drop, like I mentioned earlier, it is a big drop down the grid. I think it probably is a good fit for him at the moment because there simply isn't anything else available. I mean, you could see him in Aston Martin, perhaps with that Mercedes connection to replace Vettel.
Yeah,
you could potentially picture him elsewhere, but I think from what's currently available, which to be honest isn't much, he's got the best seat and the most natural fit because he does just slot into that Kimi role as being the senior, well experienced, successful. Obviously, he was never successful as Kimi in terms of his outright career peak, but he's been at the top for a long time. So I think it'll be a natural kind of fit in there. I think it'll probably go quite well. The other interesting thing as well is throughout his Mercedes career, he only had 1-year contracts. And I think we'll really see a more relaxed and more, I think we might see a little bit more free driving, if that makes sense. I think we'll see a little bit more expression in the way that he attacks through the midfield, and I think we might see a little bit more risk taking and going for moves and things like that because he knows he's got a long-term deal in place, which could be his last long-term deal, last multi-year deal. We never know. But I think it would be good. I think it'll be good to see what he's like with a multi-year deal in a car that he's probably going to qualify a little bit higher than what it should be due to his quali pace.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point that you make about him not really having multi-year contracts, even at Mercedes. Kimi Raikkonen is obviously moving on. Got a comment here from Nicola Palmer, basically saying Kimi Raikkonen is not a shock but we'll miss him, especially his one-liners. We'll miss his one-liners. Some say it's one-liners, some say it's arrogant rudeness. It depends on how you approach. But you also say you feel for Bottas. I do not think he has been treated very fairly, especially in the last couple of years. So I think that kind of touches on the point that you made about him potentially being able more to race a little bit more freely, not have that pressure, have that multi-year contract to just give him freedom to express himself. Because I actually do think him being an underdog or having potentially a not so great car really allows him to thrive. We've seen it in previous years when he was at Williams. I know it's not the same now as it was then, but he brought out some pretty special performances when he was at Williams, enough for Mercedes to sign him up as a de facto number 2, it turned out, but still, he made that step up. How do you think the rest of the driver market is going to kind of transpire? What else do you expect? Because I know there's been tons of rumors. Let us know in the comment section what you think the main movers will be and who will end up at teams like Williams, Alfa Romeo, who's taking that second seat. Mercedes, is Latifi going to move to Mercedes? Let us know.
Well, Ocon's part of the Mercedes driver lineup officially, and he's got a race win.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't think anything's, and I don't think it's going to be a big surprise for that Mercedes seat. I think the George deal is more or less done. I think there's a few terms and conditions that obviously need to happen at this stage. But we've now seen Kimi's announcement. We've now seen Valtteri's announcement. So that would assume, you'd assume that probably tomorrow or later this week there's going to be something about George, because Valtteri's had his day today. So obviously Kimi had his day before the race. Valtteri's had his day today. So I think the way that Mercedes are trying to handle this has been quite sensitive, and they're giving Valtteri kind of an appreciation day today, almost.
Really like that,
because they could have just said, "Look, Valtteri's going to Alfa Romeo. He'll be replaced by George." The news would be full of George. Whereas they want to give Valtteri that right kind of send off, that right kind of feel, where they've appreciated his contribution to the team. They want to see that love come through, which it has done. If you look at social media, it's overwhelmingly positive about Valtteri and about the move as well. And it's very, very good feelings at the moment about the whole move. And then that'll probably have a day or two just to calm down, and then there'll be the George announcement right on time for Ferrari's home race at Monza, just to take the limelight away from Ferrari, just for a laugh, and just to really put that spotlight on George for that upcoming race. But I think the only other real seats are, like you say, the second Alpha seat, which I think, like I said, I think he'll go to a Ferrari driver academy driver, despite whether it's free to choose for Sauber or not. I think that's probably the right decision, bringing someone like Schwartzman or Eilert and just see how they go, because you've got a known commodity with Bottas, so you've got a very good benchmark there that you can compare a younger driver against, and you can also use that opportunity to mould a younger driver in a new set of rules as well. So it's going to be more of a level playing field, so now's a good time to bring a young driver in next to someone who's very experienced with a top car. So I think that's probably a good move. I don't know if it will happen, obviously. I think there's Williams. I feel like Williams would be good to go with Nick de Vries.
Yep.
I think de Vries would be a really sensible option, considering he's kind of been in the wings for a little while. He's been in the F1 testing setup for a while, so it's not like he's been just racing electric cars and hasn't done anything in an F1 car for a while. He's been a test driver for Mercedes for quite a few years. So there's all that kind of thing. There's that second seat at Williams as well, though, if you call it the second seat, with Latifi, where obviously they've got all this de Wilton capital money. Do they need Latifi anymore? I actually think Latifi's done quite well these past few rounds. I think he's given a good account of himself. I think he's actually settled in quite well after Hungary, and he's done good things. So I don't think it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that they would choose to move Latifi on. But I think there are other options there should they choose to try and do something different there. And then the other one as well, the other interesting one is Haas, because those two young drivers do not get on. They do not get on. And we all know that if you poll the F1 community, and if you poll the paddock, Mick Schumacher is the one to stay out of those two, regardless of who's at fault, regardless of who's done what or who said what, doesn't matter. Mick is the baby brother of the F1 paddock. Everyone knows this. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some changes at Haas over the winter, because there are other parties, particularly Americans, like Andretti, for example, sniffing around having a look at that team. And that also leads me to something that I would like to explore at a later date about the powerful people in F1, because there are some very powerful people that are sniffing around these teams at the moment, that are just having a little peck at things here and there. They're just circling the wagons, and just thinking, what opportunities are there here? Yeah. And there's little things like this where there's between Schumacher and Mazepin where it's just a recipe for change. Let's put it that way. But I think that's it. I don't think there are any other available seats, are there?
No, I don't think we touched on Albon earlier. One of the watchers says Mercedes trying to steal Albon. They may be trying to just ruffle Red Bull's feathers a little bit, I think. Make it as difficult as possible for him to get a seat. But yeah, I think those are the main contenders in terms of people that we expect to come in. And it's going to shift the whole dynamic of the paddock. I think it's going to make it extremely interesting in terms of the young talent coming through. We're going to see George Russell hopefully come up against Lewis. We've got a question from Davey Wavy. Do you think Russell would put up the same challenge to Lewis that Nico did? And I'm going to kick this off and say we saw him at the Sakki Grand Prix basically put Bottas in his place. Very impressive for his very first race in the Mercedes. However, there is a big however. That race was him running on pure adrenaline, just instinct, and not having time to think about what he was really doing and just going for it. Like basically a brand new driver in the best car. He's got that natural talent to be able to perform. He did it. He did it enough to get signed, basically. But we need to give it some time to see how consistent he can be. Because we've seen he's been able to put some pretty good performances in terms of qualifying and then eventually getting a P2, despite it being extremely jammy. It happened. But at the moment, I'm not quite convinced he can do it consistently just yet. I really do want to wait and see. And there's a lot more to beating Lewis Hamilton than just being quick. I don't doubt that he can do it. I think he can do it, but he has to be perfect. He has to be spot on each and every weekend, each and every race weekend. I think he just has to literally dedicate his life to beating Lewis, because that's what Nico had to do. He deployed all tactics, mind games, all sorts. I don't think he's fully actually let on how much he committed, but Nico has come out and said that it's the hardest thing he's ever had to do in his life, that 2016 season. So I don't think it'll be as easy as people think it will be, because Lewis he's going to love the challenge. He's going to love it. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think there might be a little bit of passing the torch type activity going on. I think I can see, unless Georgia really comes out swinging, I can see 2022 being a bit of a quieter year for George, where he'll get a couple of wins and he'll do quite well and all that kind of thing. The other thing, though, I've been thinking about this today, because obviously it seems like the George needs to come in, and it seems now completely inevitable that this is what's going to happen. I always think, what other factors are there that might make this look a different way? And it's been shown that obviously George is Mr. Saturday. That's what we've come to know him as. But and then the performances on Sunday have never been quite the same. Yeah. But the one thing that I think is people maybe aren't quite remembering is that Williams is known to perform badly in dirty air, and it's known to be very aerodynamically sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that these poor starts and not great race performances and things like that are actually more to do with that Williams really struggling in dirty air and traffic, and really struggling with aerodynamic stability when it's in those kind of close quarters or close-ish quarters in terms of racing. And that the aero issues with that Williams actually haven't given George an opportunity to show how quick he is in a car that can actually contend with those racing conditions, because that car is very much optimized for the Saturday, where it's very twitchy. The aerodynamic, we saw in quali where there was a gust of wind and both Williams went into a wall. Yeah. Like it's not a unique thing to George. You know what I mean? Like Nicholas Latifi's had the same thing, and Latifi's was worse.
And
so it could be
actually.
It could be that when we actually see George in a race on a Sunday, like we saw in Bahrain, where he has got a car that's not so sensitive aerodynamically, that he actually shines, because at every other level he's been the best driver. And it's not been necessarily that close. Like if you look at his GP2 career, he was very good. Yeah. He was beating other drivers that we are now seeing at the front of the grid. and he was beating them, without really breaking that much of a sweat. If you look back at the videos, and I think these past couple of years with Williams might have actually belied his true performance on a Sunday. However, like you say, on that night in Bahrain, he didn't have anything to lose. That was his one. It was like the Eminem song, isn't it? He had his one chance, one opportunity. His knees weak, arms were heavy. Well, I'm honest already. Feet were squeezed into the Mercedes, but he never really had anything to lose. He knew that was going to be a one-time thing. He knew that he just had to give it everything. When he's thinking about technical direction, he's thinking about development, he's thinking about durability of certain components for the following race weekend. He's thinking about rule changes. He's thinking about the championship. Is that going to make a difference, or are we just going to see his quality shine through? That's the thing, and I think that's one of the biggest question marks. I think are the Sunday performances or lack thereof due to that Williams aerodynamics, or is George actually just better on Saturday? That's my biggest question going into next season.
Yeah, I think we'll get the answer next year either way. But I also think, experience, that is probably the biggest factor when it comes to like inter-team battles. Having that experience, it took Nico a couple of years to be able to beat Lewis and actually secure that title. It might take George a little while to get up to speed, because there is a lot to learn when it comes to the nuances of each car, and Lewis has built that up over several years, specifically that Mercedes. And there'll be little things that George will watch him do, and like you said, it's a little bit about passing on the baton. George will be watching him day in, day out, similar to Ronaldo coming back to Man United's. Jadon Sancho, Mason Greenwood, Marcus Rashford will all be watching Ronaldo, arguably the GOAT of football, just watching him day in, day out, picking up the little bits of how they prepare for a race, the little bits of data that they can analyze and draw that extra bit of performance from. So I do think George does have it there. He's probably, like I've said it before, he's probably my favorite driver out of the young drivers, purely based on just how professional he is. And on top of that, he's got the actual ability. We've already seen it. So we'll see. We shall see. Russell, will he be allowed to run at Lewis? So you're asking, Mike, do you reckon that Mercedes will allow Lewis and George to go head to head? I'm not too sure about this one, to be honest. I'm not too sure. I reckon it depends if Lewis secures his 8th title this year. And that's another thing we'll go on to talk about later. But I honestly do think it depends on how he does this year. I reckon if he secures his 8th title, I don't think he'll be around for too much longer. And I reckon next year, Mercedes will just let him go. We'll let them go for it, basically. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I think it'll be situational. I think, so you just mentioned something about if Lewis won the title this year. So if he won the title this year, that'd be number 8. Lewis has got 2 extra years on his contract. 8, add 2 is 10. I can guarantee if he gets his 8th title, Lewis isn't going to try and stop at 8. With those 2 years that he's got left, he's going to try and get all 10.
Yeah.
And if George is then starting to find the peak of his powers in that potentially 9th and potentially 10th championship year for Lewis, there's going to be some big rivalries, because George will be thinking, right, my time is now. I'm in my mid-20s. I'm in the best team or thereabouts, because we don't know what will happen. McLaren might be the quickest team next year. We never know. So I think it'll be situational. I think it will be situational. But I can see it being a nice passing the torch type thing, but I can also see it being fireworks.
Yeah, I think so. It definitely is going to be situational, and there's no guarantee that Mercedes will be the fastest car next year. There's zero guarantee. It could turn out to be that Valtteri Bottas is, and it's unlikely. Valtteri Bottas could turn around and have the quickest car next year, who we actually don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see. Got a comment here from Nicola. I'm a huge fan of the silver bullet, but they really need to give other drivers a go. Try to avoid team preference as what they will do when Lewis retires. Basically, it's a good point. I think they are keeping one eye on the future. This is a massive indication of that. If you watch videos from the past about Lewis, after the 2016 season, he was categorically against having this kind of team dynamic. It's very interesting to watch him actually say that. I think he realized the damage that 2016 caused within the team. And then between that 1-2 driver dynamic, he realized how damaging it was. And he was like, yeah, really don't want to be involved in that again. And it's likely to happen unless there is some sort of strict kind of rule sent from Toto. It's likely to happen again. So Lewis is going to have to step up his game if he wants to be able to beat George. I mean, he's the reigning champion. There's no saying that he's going to automatically come up behind George, but we'll have to wait and see.
The other part of this puzzle as well is that Toto manages both drivers again. So Toto is thinking, right, Lewis is probably the best driver ever. We want to try and get him as many titles as possible. But he's also thinking, I've got another client here who is a potential multiple-time world champion. At what point do I want to start saying, right, okay, now it's your time to start winning titles? Because he's in a very difficult position because he represents both drivers. So there's a conflict there in terms of what he's going to do and the way that he's going to approach it. There's also the team principal and the CEO. So he's got a lot of strings to try and pull there in the right directions at the right time with the right people. Because there are a lot of ways that this could go wrong for Mercedes, and there are a lot of ways where Toto can potentially alienate people and make people feel like they're not being treated fairly or not getting the respect that they need or deserve or anything like that. So it needs to be worked very, very carefully. And I think that might actually be part of the delay, because they probably are working out, right, okay, let's really sit and think about this, because it's all under the same roof. And it is a family in terms of it being quite tight. And I sometimes wonder, is it too tight? Because there's no space in that situation. I imagine it's very suffocating when you're in that constantly. And I think Lewis has mentioned that before about saying how it's so tight and it's so intense at all times. It's not like you're managed by different people and you can go off and you can go and do your own thing, and you can have a chat to your management about it, and you can have a chat to your agent and say, right, okay, I'm not sure about the situation, or what's the best thing to do here? Because that's the team principal. That's the CEO. That's the person that signs your contracts. That's the person that negotiates the contracts. So it is really walking into the lion's den. And for George as well, obviously it's a no-brainer, but he has to go into that with his eyes open, knowing that he is in a situation there where he is at the mercy of his own performance, and it's his performance that will decide his future.
Yeah, I completely agree that it will be his performance that decides his future. But I also think it's a win-win for Toto, because we saw last year how George's performance allowed Toto to have the upper hand when it comes to negotiations. So if George does outdo Lewis, if it does happen, Toto will be in a very strong position in terms of negotiation again. Lewis may not even get a new contract. It is that deep. It is that serious, given how expensive he is as a driver. We all know that he is one of the greatest of all time. But like our commenters say, Mercedes have to keep one eye on the future and they have to move on eventually. And then conversely, if Lewis does outdo George, they can just continue business as normal. And they know George isn't quite there at the moment. Give it a few more seasons. It may happen in the long run. And it doesn't necessarily mean that George is worse than any other driver on the grid. It just means that it's confirmed everything that we knew about Lewis even more. It's compounded it even more in our minds. So I don't think, for me, Toto's probably in a win-win situation. We've got a comment here from The Answer is 42. Will Tsunoda stick around? He's like a favour for Honda at the moment. It's actually a good question. We've not really talked about the AlphaTauri setup and if there's likely to change, because I've not really heard too much about what's likely to happen. Imagine Pierre Gasly will be sticking around, but I'm not too sure about Tsunoda. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Gasly's making Tsunoda look like a rookie this year, isn't he? Because Gasly is I think it's impossible, and I don't like the phrase, but he is outperforming that AlphaTauri. He's getting to a position where he's not really supposed to be. Like, for example, fourth this weekend. He's really outstanding in that team, which makes you wonder what the future holds for Gasly. But in terms of Tsunoda, you look at what AlphaTauri is for, and it is to develop young drivers, really, for that potential step up. And yeah, I understand the comment, and I kind of get where they're coming from. But he's really young. He's really, really young, and he's showing that he can at least keep up-ish. Although, to be honest, he's not done great this year. I wouldn't say he's excelled. In fact, I'd say it was a bit of a disappointment. I think he's just below where he needs to be. I think if he was averaging 2 or 3 positions higher every race, you'd be like, right, okay, he's making progress. He's young. He's a rookie. He's had a fast track through the youth systems, and here we are. But I think he's not quite got his head above water at the moment. But that then raises the question: who would come into that spot in his place? And obviously, Red Bull have quite an extensive young driver program that they're constantly placing in different formula and giving opportunities to elsewhere. So, but I don't think he's in danger yet. I think he's got at least until, well, it's tough to say, isn't it, with everything Red Bull? I think they'll give him another year, personally.
Yeah, I'm not too sure who they'd bring us. Let us know in the comment section who Red Bull or their academy could bring in instead of Yuki Tsunoda or Pierre Gasly. I know it's a long shot, but let us know what your predicted kind of driver lineups are. Any wild card predictions in there, give it to us, and we'll have a look later on, even if it's not live. If you're watching now, please hit the like button so more people will get a chance to watch this discussion. But just talking about AlphaTauri and the potential for Alex Albon to go to Williams, it did make me think, given that Red Bull are investing in their own engine department, what's the potential that Red Bull could start supplying engines to other teams? What do you think it's likely? I know it's going to take time for them to get a hold of how the engines actually work, and it's a big step to become a supplier. But do you see it happening? It's literally just
obviously they'll have 2 teams, so there's 4 cars that they need to supply. I think if they were to do any more than that, obviously they'd be doing more than what Honda would do, which I think for the most part they're trying to consolidate at the moment, aside from poaching Mercedes, right? Mercedes engineers and stuff from HPP. But I think it'll be a while before they try to expand that, because they're pouring so much resource into covering their current demands in terms of those 2 teams. I can't see them doing more than that, at least not for now. I think as well, you look at the other teams, and most of them are connected to some sort of manufacturer or something like that. So you've always got Mercedes, you've got McLaren. I can't see McLaren going to Red Bull. You've got Alpine.
Do you know who it is that is really made me think that? It's Williams.
Yeah.
The way that Williams have come out talking about not needing pay drivers and wanting to explore different things, and the fact that Albon is even a topic of discussion for that team, that is like, it's a bit strange. It is a bit strange. I was thinking, what's their long-term play? Are they trying to extend their influence of power, seeing how Ferrari do it and Mercedes do it without having an actual second team like Red Bull? Are they trying to extend their power?
Yeah, I think with Alfa Romeo, I think Alfa Romeo signed an extension on that deal, on that sponsorship deal. If you think about Sauber, then Sauber were actually the first team to have Red Bull sponsorship in F1 a long time ago. I think if that Alfa Romeo deal fell through, then maybe I think there is potential for Red Bull to sneak back in there. But I think while Alfa Romeo are there, I think I can't see them going elsewhere aside from Ferrari. I just can't see it. Unless there's some huge disaster with Ferrari and they're terrible, I can't see Alfa Romeo going somewhere else. Just for the branding, just for the brand reasons.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying there with Williams. Williams is a bit of a dark horse to switch. I mean, you look at that F1 kind of corridor in the Midlands, and in theory, there isn't anything to stop Williams switching it up and going to Red Bull, because they're, it's all in that kind of same area. For people that don't know, there's an area probably between where Sakki and I live, probably not far off, dead in the middle, where most of the F1 teams are, and where most of the F1 activity happens in terms of where the teams are based. Obviously, they attract international employees, well, not only the drivers, but all the engineers and aerodynamicists and everything, all of the staff that go into that. But they are within a relatively short distance of each other, aren't they?
Yeah, that is true. It's not extremely far-fetched. I know it's out there, but the way that Red Bull and Christian Horner have been moving this year, I wouldn't put anything past them. And like, I've actually got a video upcoming on Christian Horner, and like a lot of information that I discovered in that video just makes me think Christian Horner's, he's still being slept on. Like, people really don't rate him. I know some people call him Karen Horner, and he has got a bit of a reputation this year of moaning, but it doesn't diminish the guy's ambition. I think his ambition is huge. I don't think a lot of people realize just how good he is and just how big his ambition is. So that is one for the future. Keep an eye out for it. Got a comment here from Nicola again. Out of the young drivers, who matches Verstappen? Is it a Russell, Perez, Norris? Is that not the future that Mercedes need to be thinking about? Yeah, I definitely do agree with you. Mercedes, I think, with the signing of Russell, which should be happening in the next few days, I think that is them kind of saying we are thinking about the future. We're putting our kind of eggs in George's basket. I'm not quite sure Perez is that driver to match Verstappen. I know he's very good, but at the same time, he's on the older side of the spectrum. I think he's closer to my age, which is still young, but it's no George Russell, it's no Max Verstappen, it's no Lando Norris. It's mature. And then Norris, I'm not quite sure just yet. We need to see him in a better car. I think the trajectory from McLaren, based on what they were doing a few years ago, has been pretty special. That their progress year on year has been really encouraging. So they just need to keep on going, keep on doing what they've been doing. Their team principal's been doing an amazing job, and hopefully next year, if there was any team that was able to capitalize on the rule change and the restricted budget, it could be McLaren, given how they've been operating, given their owners not really prioritizing the team, the F1 team, as like the marquee business. It's been more about car manufacturing than actual Formula One, which stands in stark contrast to Ron Dennis's approach. So hopefully we'll see Norris continue to win. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Adam.
Yeah, just to go off what you were saying, there's obviously Norris at McLaren, there's Russell probably at Mercedes, there's Leclerc at Ferrari as well, which wasn't mentioned there. And he obviously got Verstappen and Gasly, wherever he ends up, and even Ocon. I think those two are still kind of underrated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of young talent in F1 at the moment, and they're all at different teams, which makes it even better. And even other talents, I know he's not that highly rated, but Lance Stroll is still really young, and he's got immense financial backing. So I can't see, he's going to be in the sport for a long time, and there will be a time for Lance Stroll where things shake right, and the money goes to the right spots at the right time, and he's got a very competitive car. So I think there's probably half a dozen young drivers that are going to be very, very successful, and will really. What I hope doesn't happen is I hope that people don't end up underestimating this young crop of drivers because they're taking wins and championships away from each other. Because it'll be, Max, in terms of just his talent alone, is a multiple time world champion. But he will have at least one of those taken away from him by Leclerc or a Norris or a Russell, who are also very, very good drivers. And then you've even got that next batch coming through, like Mick Schumacher will be good next year because it always takes him a year to bed in. whoever else comes to, Schwartzman, for example, is very highly rated. Piastri, very highly rated. Porsche, very highly rated again. So there'll be that next batch coming through. But yeah, I agree with Nicola's point that Mercedes have made this decision as succession planning. Like, you think about management in the workplace, you have succession planning. You need to hire that talent through, otherwise it goes elsewhere. And that's the decision we've made, because their chief rival is Max, who is young and has got a long future ahead of him.
Yeah, I always forget how young Lance Stroll is. Like, is he the third youngest or second youngest of the grid at the moment?
Yeah, he's very young.
He's still extremely young, and I always forget that he's still learning. So, like you said, I think things just need to line up for him and a number of other drivers. And it could happen. There's no guarantee that Red Bull will be able to continue kind of giving Max the best car. They've managed to achieve it this year. But there's no guarantee that will continue next year or the year after. So like you said, a number of these drivers could come and kind of disrupt Max's ability to secure multiple world championships. But ultimately, Max is the one that stands out for me. Like, I think people talk about Lewis's records never being broken. I don't quite buy into that. I think Max, given his age, is in prime position to do equally as good as Lewis. If things fall into place for him, that's the key thing. Like, all the stars have to align, and there's nothing to guarantee that it will happen. And I think if you asked Lewis before he moved to Mercedes, he probably would have said, yeah, it's a long shot. It's probably not going to happen. The chance of reaching 7 world titles, yeah, unlikely. We've got a comment here from Nicola mentioning a Dennis Hager. I'm
guessing.
Holger. We'll go with Holger. He's Norwegian and Formula 3 up-and-coming driver. Thanks for that. Let us know in the comment section if you know anyone else, if you've got any other suggestions. We've got a comment here from the answer is 42. I'm not 42, I'm 30. Thanks for the joke there. Would Horner really let you beat him if you use his engine and they were good?
I don't even think Christian Horner lets his kids beat him in that muscle.
I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I think with engines, I'm pretty sure it depends on how much the team is willing to invest in the engine supplier. And I'm pretty sure it's a tiered system where the more you pay, the better engine you get. I'm pretty sure.
I think it depends. I think there are probably 2 levels where you're a customer team and you don't necessarily contribute, and you get the upgrades maybe a couple of race weekends after, or you sign that kind of affiliate deal and you get exactly the same.
Yeah, because I know technically now red engine suppliers aren't allowed to provide engines that are worse than the ones that they use. So, like, basically secondhand engines or however you describe it. Legally, that's not allowed in F1. But what I'm talking about is previously, I'm pretty sure that was the reason why McLaren struggled with Honda, because they didn't want to invest in kind of paying them that extra little bit of money to develop the engine. Like, I'm pretty sure someone that's in the know has told me that's the reason why McLaren struggled so much with Honda. Yeah, I'm not. Oh, I think I slipped up there. I shouldn't have said that. Yeah, a McLaren in the know person. I'm not going to divulge. That is actually someone actually told me that. So I'm pretty sure that we've seen it with how Red Bull have done this year. They've pumped so much money into that development of the engine. It's paying off. And I'm pretty sure that's why McLaren struggled in the past. But to answer your question, yeah, I don't think it's possible. Got a comment here. Keep it up, man. Greetings from Formula Talks on Insta. Go and check them out on Instagram if you've got the time. Thanks for the shout out. And we're just going to end off quickly, just following on from the Dutch Grand Prix. Max Verstappen obviously won his home race for the first time in Formula One, which was amazing to kind of witness the atmosphere on par with a Monza or a Silverstone. It was brilliant to see the Orange Army out in full force. What are your predictions for the rest of the season, then, Adam? Just going on briefly, what do you think is going to happen for the rest of the season? Because I've got my own thoughts how it's tipped and what the balance is looking like.
It's tough, isn't it? I mean, like we've said, like we messaged about this, but we didn't speak about it, I think, deliberately, so we would have it now. I won't bet against Lewis yet, because you look at the positions that he's been in previously, and yes, he's been dominant, but he has also had his back against the wall a couple of times, and he's come through. Until Max breaks that seal, I still will predict Lewis. Just because, just on the basis of Lewis knows what it takes. He's done it before, many times. It's business as usual for him, whereas Max is in uncharted territory. And obviously Red Bull were very successful with Vettel, but that was a while ago now. And people move and people change and that kind of thing. Whereas that Mercedes setup is bred for winning, and it has won time and time again. So I still feel, although I actually think that Max in that Red Bull, in terms of outright pace, he's probably a little bit quicker than Lewis in terms of outright pace. I think if you look at the races that are coming up, a lot of them are quite long, flowing, kind of the type of tracks that favour Mercedes a little bit more, and their slightly longer wheelbase and the way that their cars kind of set up. I think we've got through most of the tracks where Red Bull have an obvious advantage, where they're very change, the low speed, medium speed, change, straight. I think that's where the Mercedes have that little bit of an advantage, or have done. We don't know what's happened since. Is that long straights, long sweeping corners, and I still won't bet against Mercedes and Lewis yet, not yet.
Oof, okay, so you're going for Lewis and Mercedes. Let us know what you think in the comments section below. Who do you think will steal the championship this season? For me, when I was doing the video about Max Verstappen and the number of DNFs he's had in his first 7 seasons versus Lewis, like, it really did surprise me how many in total Max has had. So go and check out that video when you've got the time. But conversely, when you look at it this season, he's had a few DNFs and poor finishes already in the first half of the season. And I don't think Lewis has had that amount of bad luck or DNFs this season. And it just makes me think, if Max had not been in those positions or had that bit of bad luck, the gap would be so much bigger to Lewis than it is now. Max would have quite a large advantage in that championship, which just makes me think, on top of the car being pretty spot on for Red Bull that Max is driving at the moment, that Max is gonna secure it this year. I really do think we're seeing a different Red Bull. Like, you can see the way that Christian is going for it in the media constantly. He's worked up. He really wants this championship. Max really wants this championship. And I think it's just different this year. And I really do think Max has matured so much, and he's putting everything in the right place and the right time. He's having a few of these DNFs and incidents, but the fact that he's 3 points ahead of Lewis, given all that, I don't think Lewis can afford to slip up even once, have one DNF. Otherwise, I think Max will run away with it. I really do think Red Bull, it is their season. But let us know what you think in the comment section below. We've got a few comments here. Got one from Uzer. Hello, folks. Bottas stayed on the grid. I think he'll do well at Alpha. Thank you, Uzer. Go and check out Uzer's channel when you get the chance. We've got one from Andy T. Lewis will win and become the GOAT. However, I think it will be Max. Because Max pushes too hard and makes some mistakes. I feel Lewis has consistency. He definitely does have consistency and experience to match. I want Lewis to win, but I think it will be Verstappen. Thank you, 42. Anything else you want to say, Adam?
Just on that comment from Andy about Max making mistakes, just brought my mind to something. It's interesting that we've seen a couple of strategy mistakes out of Mercedes when they've been pushed by Red Bull. Yeah. That's been quite interesting. Like with Zandvoort, that pit stop might have kind of ended Lewis's chance to snatch a victory there.
Yeah.
And I think it was maybe a little bit naive because they put him out in traffic, which just, that felt like a bit of a tipping point because Lewis was catching Max. And there were a few stages in the race where he was catching and he was quicker. But Max did have some lucky breaks with traffic, which I don't think we can deny when you look at the race. But yeah, I think that was his undoing there, because I think that was a winnable race for Mercedes. But I do think it's interesting that there have been a few strategy errors. So it's not all just about the two cars and their outright performance and the two drivers and their outright performance. There will be decisions that come into this. And as much as I won't bet against Lewis until he's beat, I can see it being very close. I think the final difference between the pair of them will be less than a race victory. I think it'll be less than 25 points between.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very tight right up until the end. So I've got a comment here from who's there on F1. I think Red Bull has a slightly better car overall, so I think Max will take that victory towards the end of the season. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I can see that happening. Just the way that things are kind of panning out, and the fact that Mercedes are they're making so many mistakes, which I think someone made a comment, the fact that they've had such a good car, it hasn't really been a big issue. Lewis has just been able to do what Lewis does and make up for those mistakes, but he's not going to be able to do it this year. I think Lewis and Mercedes have to get everything spot on. They have to be immaculate, otherwise they're not going to give themselves any chance of it happening. Got a comment here from Mike Farrow. Red Bull will run out of parts and budget. Yeah, that could come into play. We've seen Red Bull get quite upset after Silverstone because of the implications on budget and their use of engines, both Checo and Max. So that will come into play later on this season. I can imagine Max will have to take a grid penalty when he decides to use additional engines. So we'll see how that pans out. And we've got a comment from Nicola. Max has grown and is shocking Mercedes. Yep, he is. And Lewis, yep, you're right. Lewis cannot have any mistakes. This could possibly be Lewis's hardest season. I think Lewis, you see the way that he's behaving. He's kind of acknowledging that it's a real challenge. He's giving Max a lot of respect. He's enjoying the moment. He's enjoying the battle because, yeah, he's definitely not had it in a few years, pretty much since 2016. Nicola also loved Zandvoort race, and it could be possibly her favourite circuit. I'm quite surprised there. Quite surprised. Was it because of the atmosphere? I'm not quite sure it's my favourite circuit, mainly because of the lack of pure racing and the ability to actually overtake. I think Max came out and said that position is king. He knew that. That's why qualifying was just so important, because he knew once he got out ahead, it would only be strategy that could potentially cause an upset or cause him to lose that race. So I really do want to see them explore other racetracks. I think if Max goes on to continue and perform in the way that he does, they're definitely going to stick with Zandvoort. Like I just don't see it coming off the calendar, because he's the rising star. The Dutch, they love Max, and you see it at every race now, not just in Zandvoort, the Orange Army. I think it's going to be massively popular. I might even go myself. It's not too far from London, so I might have to jump on the plane, but that is pretty much it. Have you got anything else to say, Adam?
Well, hopefully, just to go back to your point about the tracks, hopefully these 2022 cars will give us some closer racing on these kinds of circuits. Because it is great, and it is really good to see the undulations and the banking and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was cool. It's
a bit of a difference to the Tilkedromes that are all flat and this, acres and acres of runoff and all that kind of thing. It's nice to see an old school track like this. Also, it would be good to see these. Yeah, it would be good to see this stuff.
Yeah,
it would be good to see the overtaking.
Turn 3, Nicola, loved that. I've got to put a video up on the Instagram account of Charles Leclerc going through turn 3. That slingshot, beautiful. I can see why you like Zandvoort, and especially that turn. But that is just about it. We're just about under an hour on the live stream. I think it's our longest one yet. Thank you for joining, everyone. If you're watching this on playback, please leave a comment for us. Make sure you like this video before you drop out. Like it as you're watching it. It really does help the video get out to more people. Until next time, everyone, thanks for watching.